time for Bradford and Brooks, a civil discourse about civil affairs in Bardstown, Kentucky, and around the world. Please welcome your host for Bradford and Brooks, Margie Bradford and Jim Brooks. Now, get ready to enjoy a community forum to encourage citizen participation in the political process by the thoughtful discussion of political and civil issues.
All right, good morning, Bardstown and Nelson County, and welcome to another edition of Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks here with my co-host, Margie Bradford. Good morning, Margie.
Good morning, Jim.
Well, we've got a sunny but cool Wednesday out
I
there.
will take it. I will take it.
I'm happy to see the sunshine.
I am too. I'm glad to see that heavens are not opening up again today.
Well, it was a little windy yesterday.
Yes.
And,
Well,
of course, I live on a hill. It's always windy, but it was a gale force wind yesterday,
right.
and very cold. I don't know what the wind chill was, but it was.
It was down there,
It was
huh?
down there. All right. Well, let's see. Well, Margie, it'll be that time of year again.
It
ready
is
for
that time of year.
The May primary is fast approaching,
It is.
and we're going to get back into candidate interviews for the constitutional offices, and we thought we would start off with a candidate seeking the top spot, the governor's office. Adam Edelen, former state auditor. And good morning, Adam.
It's good to be here.
And thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely.
It's good to have you back.
Well, I'm well familiar with this community, and I just want to echo what Margie said earlier. I was afraid that our big jobs program was going to be putting people back to work building the ark. I'm glad it's quit raining. Goodness.
Well, we got one up in northern Kentucky that may be able
And I
to
imagine
float.
it'll float. So yeah, that's a good point.
Well, Adam, we're happy to have you, and you are, I guess, you just announced for governor recently. And,
About a month ago.
yeah,
That's right.
You've been traveling the state and got your website, and everything's moving forward. Well, let me ask you, why did you choose this time to throw your hat in the ring for governor?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm running for governor because I think I'm the candidate who has the best skill set to lead Kentucky through what is going to be a dramatically changing economy. Mm-hmm. We are seeing, Kentucky is ranked number one in the country for percentage of jobs that could be eliminated due to automation. And we're entering a period of transformative technological and economic and even cultural change. And, from people who are struggling to get by to folks who have good jobs and who are worried about whether they can keep them as we make technological advances, I really am running for governor because I think I'm the candidate that gives working people a fighting chance in a changing economy. And I think I'm the person who has the skill set to make sure that we're not only adequate to dealing with the challenges that are coming with our economic transition, but that we can benefit from it. And I have a record of doing that in the private sector, but we have just got to build a modern Kentucky if we're going to be able to create a place where people can realize the American dream in the community they came from. And so that's what animates me to run for governor.
Adam, you want to elaborate on that a little bit? I know we were talking earlier about your reasoning for talking about these changes.
Sure, and it's happening to everybody who's in business or everybody who's involved in the economy knows that changes are coming from the way that renewable energy is going to change the way we power our lives to the fact that automation is going to threaten a lot of jobs that are manufacturing based that we built in Kentucky, which in automotive manufacturing is the third largest. Well, we need political leadership that understands the forces that are at work. And one concrete example is the fact that by 2023, just 4 years from now, hopefully the last year of my first term as governor, every automotive manufacturer in the United States will be producing an electric motor that is competitive in price with the internal combustion engine. The challenge for our people, particularly in a state that again is a superpower in terms of automotive manufacturing, and we have lots of suppliers here in Nelson County, is that there are hundreds of individually milled parts that go into the motor that sits under your hood, folks. there are 17 parts that go into an electric motor, and we all can see what's happening with the transition to this. We saw General Motors just at Christmas last year close down several plants in the industrial Midwest, not because they weren't profitable, but because they've made the decision that the future of automotive manufacturing is in electric motors. And so we've got to understand and be more than passively aware that things are changing. We need political leaders who know that we've got to modernize our economy. We've got to change the way we do business. We've got to stop chasing an economy that just doesn't exist anymore. And Margie, a great example of how we do that is right here in Bardstown. You know, Bardstown figured out a long time ago that if we're going to develop a diversified economy that can provide for its people, it can't just be based on the back of being the cheapest place to do business. It's got to be based on being the best place to live. And we've got to make quality of life at the center of our economic development strategy. We got to understand that, you know, that the economic development approach we have is designed to chase an economy that doesn't exist anymore. It's low skill, low wage jobs, and there's just very little future in that. But we've seen right here and in some other places that we can build prosperity when we understand that quality of life is important. No factory is going to come to a community where the executives don't want to live. They don't want to hear that you've shortchanged education. They don't want to hear that you've eliminated environmental and workplace protections for workers. I mean, these are things that may have been attractive to industrialists in the 1980s, but it's just not at all relevant to building a modern economy. And I'm the guy, I think, who knows how to do that, who's on the ballot this year.
Well, Adam, your experience as auditor, doesn't that sort of give you a leg up in being able to analyze the situation?
I think it does, and it also helps, you know, for the Democrats out there who are wondering how we're going to beat Matt Bevin. We're simply going to have a candidate who can go toe-to-toe with him on job creation and who has a record of fighting corruption. Now, the message to all Kentuckians is that a poor state can't afford to lose a dime to inefficiency or corruption. And that brings us all together, I would think. And, you know, those are dollars that we need to shore up our pensions, to fully fund education, to invest in the digital infrastructure of the future. And I think everybody knows, Republican and Democrat alike, that as state auditor, I filled the prisons up, from our crooked former commissioner of agriculture to school superintendents who were on the take. I have a record of ferreting out corruption that I think is stronger than that of anybody else on the ballot this year.
We were talking briefly before the show about the importance of broadband.
Right.
And I know that the Kentucky Wired Initiative has been
a mess.
And widely criticized as a waste of money, et cetera. And in our community, we have a lot of broadband, but there's still areas of the community where you have to use a hotspot for internet access or dial-up speed. But we're fortunate that we have cable internet and other options. There's wide swaths of Kentucky where you have no broadband
in
access.
Rural Kentucky, it's almost 2/3 to 70% who don't have it. There are counties who have zero access, and even in our urban areas, there are big areas that don't have access to broadband. And this is important, and I hope your listeners understand, and I'm sure they do, that access to broadband is just as important as access to the interstate system was during Dwight Eisenhower, and it's just as important as rural electrification was under Franklin Roosevelt.
Right.
You are not relevant to the new economy if you don't have access to broadband. And my wife and I live on a little farm outside Lexington, 10, 12 miles from downtown, and we work off of a hotspot at the house. And it's slow, and people are, I know, frustrated with the reliability of satellite internet. We have to make this investment, and there are places where the private sector has done a very good job of laying the fiber and getting connectivity. But there are places where that hasn't happened, and government has an important role of making sure that everybody is connected, regardless of whether you live on the plowed ground or the mountains or the inner city. And I think the best real-life example I have of just how far behind we are is that if you're ever in rural Kentucky between 4 and 6 o'clock in the evening, go to a McDonald's, and you will see the parking lot jam-packed. And it's not just people getting milkshakes and hamburgers, it's people who are using the Wi-Fi.
Right.
And when we've got a fast food restaurant is considered the most reliable provider of internet connectivity in a lot of areas, that just shows you how far we've got to go to be relevant to the new economy. And it shows you how badly we've been failed by Frankfurt. I mean, this is something that we should have been on years ago, and there's certainly been issues with Kentucky Wired. And I think I think that happened because we haven't had governors lead from the front on this issue. This will be an everyday issue for me as governor, and we will get every Kentuckian connected.
Well, I think broadband, it's not just it's a quality of life issue.
Yes, sir.
As well as economic development. It's vital. The city of Bardstown owns its own cable system and fiber optic.
Helps a lot.
And which is wonderful. I've been a subscriber for 20-some years. But it's been important in economic development because all of our businesses want a fiber connection.
That goes fast,
Sure,
right?
Sure, and so they all have it.
And
that's just that's another check mark that our community can say that we have.
Well, listen, Bardstown, if I could replicate Bardstown all over Kentucky, we would be the most prosperous state in the country. This is an incredibly wonderful community. It is a Kentucky treasure. But back to your point about broadband is that companies, to be able to just compete, not just create jobs, but to maintain the ones they've got and to grow their businesses, have to be able to move at the speed of commerce. And if Kentucky is a place where people look at a map and say, we don't have the fiber we need to be able to move money or to be able to take care of our online clients, that is a huge mark against us. So we've got to get with this, and it's got to be a top priority, and it's certainly among my top priorities in this campaign.
Well, Adam, the Eastern Kentucky, I know there's been lots of discussion over the years about economic development efforts in Eastern Kentucky. Do you have any ideas for, of course, broadband access will help a lot. Will help a lot. Any ideas for economic development for Eastern?
I do, and I've got more than just ideas. I actually have a project. I think Margie's familiar with this. I have partnered with a coal company and a renewable energy engineering firm, and we plan to put on a 1,000-acre mountaintop removal site 600,000 solar panels that will produce 100 megawatts of power, reflecting $120 million capital investment. Not a dime of that is state taxpayer money. And all at the same time put back to work a few hundred out-of-work coal miners. We have worked on this for 3 years. We have the deal done. We'll be announcing the particulars of that very soon. But that's a concrete example of how we can move forward. Renewable energy is extraordinarily important, and we're not talking about replacing coal. What we're talking about is including it as part of our portfolio. Right. Because if the biggest producer of renewable energy in America isn't liberal California, it's conservative Texas. And it's because the oil and gas guys figured out that if there's more money to be made in being an all of the above energy fund, then that's what they'll do. And they've done it extraordinarily successful. If Texas can be a national leader in renewable energy, so can we. We can create thousands of jobs in Kentucky in renewable energy. They're literally being created everywhere. Solar installation is the fastest growing job in America. There'll be a demand for it just over the next several years of over 500,000 to 600,000 jobs. We're seeing these jobs created everywhere but Kentucky. And that's because our political leadership is doubling down on an economy that just doesn't exist anymore.
Well, there's a bill in the legislature right now which would really punish
and it's god-awful.
Owners of solar panels.
It's awful.
And it would punish the companies that are trying to, who are selling them.
That's right. And it's a big mistake because literally the whole world is rushing as fast as they can in the other direction. And Frankfurt politicians are looking and saying, no, I think we'll go the other direction. And that's just dumb. The fact of the matter is every single one of the Fortune 500 companies is under some kind of sustainability mandate from their shareholders or their board. They will not come to states where they cannot at least have some of their energy offering, some of the energy portfolio that they demand be renewable energy. And the approach we've got just isn't working. And we are literally missing out on thousands of good jobs that can be created here. My partner and I, who's a coal executive, we joke that had we recommended doing this, solar deal in Eastern Kentucky 5 or 6 years ago, we'd been run out of town on a rail. But we've got a wait list of out-of-work miners who just want the opportunity to be interviewed for these jobs. And we need to make Kentucky a renewable energy leader, not just in order to catch up with the rest of the world, but to get us to where we need to be.
Well, I think think I'm hearing from what you're talking about that you're a coalition builder.
I am. I'm very proud of that. And not just in my economic development work, but you remember, for instance, the investigation of Richie Farmer that I launched very early as state auditor. That was done in partnership with Jamie Comer, who was the Republican Commissioner of Agriculture and now is in Congress for Western Kentucky. We worked closely together to do that. The work I did on uncovering the tragic and scandalous number of untested rape kits in Kentucky was bipartisan in nature. The work I did pursuing corrupt public school superintendents and making sure dollars were getting to the classroom where they have impact, that was all really bipartisan. So I do think I have a unique skill set to bring people together, because I think what we all agree on is there's a lot of fighting going on in Frankfort right now, but I don't think there's a lot of progress being made. And I think that means you got to produce a governor who has a different kind of skill set, who has the ability to bring people together to do big things.
Well, speaking as a concerned voter, I want to see a governor who's going to be listening to the people.
Yes, ma'am.
At least sitting down and listening to them.
So I'm doing that almost every night, Margie. I am traveling all over Kentucky, and I'm having town hall meetings. And just in the last couple of days, we were in Paducah, Bowling Green, and last night we were in Henderson. And this is important, and I have committed this is something I'm going to keep up. You know, we've had anywhere from 50 to 150 people show up for each of these town halls, but we have a multiple of that watching it on Facebook Live from all over the state. And I think one of the as technology has changed and social media has become so important, I think it presents the opportunity for a heightened level of engagement between elected officials and the public, provided you've got the courage and authenticity to talk and tell people who you are and what you're about, and answer questions, which I'm doing. And in answering questions, and here's the thing, and I'll announce this on this show because I'm so excited about it. This is going to be a practice I'm going to continue as governor. I love the town hall format. It gives me energy. I've learned things. I've learned great ideas, and the people of Kentucky have just as much to contribute as they have as they require. And I think we need to have political leaders of all stripes communicating more directly with the public and not relying on the traditional paths.
Well, there's a lot of frustration with people right now in the current political situation of not being able to contact their legislator.
That's right.
And not having an audience. So I think people are really angry about that.
And they should be.
And they're frustrated, and they, they want someone who's going to listen to them, who may not agree with them, but at least listen to their concerns.
That's exactly right. And I'm a listener, and I am a coalition builder, and I am a talker. So I love being in the company of people who care a lot about this state. And there are so many folks in Kentucky who fit that bill. An overwhelming majority of our people care a whole lot about their communities and their commonwealth.
Well, Adam, you've conducted the town halls and going to continue. What concerns are you hearing around the state from constituents?
I'm hearing a lot about folks being really concerned about the future of the economy. I'm hearing a lot of concern about how we bring opportunity back to the forgotten places. I'm hearing a lot of concern that the pension dispute, and as important as that is, I think there is a sense out there that keeping the pension promise isn't the best we can do, it's the least we can do. And I think people have a sense that we need to be talking about how we make our schools better, not just keeping what we've got. And so there's a lot of frustration out there. I hear a lot about medical marijuana. I'm very surprised I hear that. And the one thing that surprises me that people are really responding to me overwhelmingly about that I didn't anticipate is the fact, we're the only ticket running for governor and lieutenant governor that's not going to accept a dime of PAC money. And when I say, with the lessons I learned on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings from Scripture, that you can't serve two masters. Right. And when I talk about, you can't change politics and you can't change government if you're financed the same way all these campaigns have been forever, And that's why we're not going to take PAC money. I have really been surprised at the response to that. It cuts across all age groups, men and women, black, white, rural, urban. Everybody really responds to that, and I think people are just have this sense that their government doesn't belong to them anymore. And when we talk about returning it to them, we're really getting a lot of response from that. I've been really, really pleasantly surprised about that.
Well, I think everybody recognizes that, big money, has a negative influence on
It does, and it certainly crowds out the voice of the people.
It does.
And here's a great example. I made the New York Times last week because I'm a tobacco farmer's son who came out for a statewide smoking ban in most public places. 70+% of people in Kentucky agree with me on that position. But we haven't been able to get that done because the big cigarette lobby spent $500,000 to $600,000 last legislative session keeping it from happening. We've got almost 100 school districts in Kentucky where it's still legal to smoke on a school campus. I mean, that's just crazy. We spend $2 billion a year treating smoking-related illnesses, and we spend only $2.6 million on smoking cessation. It's not only is it immoral, it's dumb, but it speaks to, in a concrete way, as an example that big money crowds out common sense policies that are very popular with the public.
Okay. You entered a race where there are with some big name contenders,
Sure.
Some excellent candidates. How do you set yourself apart from the other candidates running for governor?
Well, not taking the PAC money is a big part of it. We're running an ideas campaign based on ideas of the future. We're the only one you'll hear talking about renewable energy or modernizing our economy. And beyond that, though, I think the real point of differentiation is background. I grew up in Meade County. When my folks brought me home from the hospital, it was to a single-wide trailer, and my mother was about to turn 17, and my dad was building grain bins for a living. And as a result, I know what it's like to have had the opportunity to improve because those opportunities were there for my parents. And college didn't cost what it did then. But I'm somebody who knows what it's like to have bounced a check. I'm somebody who knows what it's like to have been in a family where we sweat the rent. I know what it's like to be in a car saying a prayer with your mom that the car starts. Right. But as a result, those experiences, and I'm far from them now, but those experiences ground me in not just what we need to do, but why we need to do it. I have felt the burn of what it means to be somebody who feels left out or knocked down. And that, combined with my record of job creation and my record of fighting corruption, makes me, I think, the best candidate to defeat Matt Bevin in the fall. But that's ultimately going to be up to the people of Kentucky, and I'm doing my best to make the case to them that I'm the right guy.
Well, you're not part of a dynasty and weren't born with a silver spoon.
I wasn't, and that's for sure. And, you can't pick your parents, but I think the experiences we get from being grounded in the real world are incredibly important because what I see missing in politics today at every level is empathy. It's an understanding that people are feeling the burn, that people are really nervous. If there was a needle that balanced between how Kentuckians are feeling right now, I think it's between anger and fear. And it's because people see their quality of life being diminished. They have a lot of fear about how they're going to send their gifted daughter to college or how the son who has a drug addiction is going to get treated because there aren't beds in the community to do that sort of thing. Right. And I think people who've lived with those experiences make better leaders at times when those experiences dominate the way people are feeling. Andy Beshear is a great guy, really is a nice guy. Oh, yeah. But he hasn't felt a lot of these issues. Rocky is a super guy. Rocky's a good friend. He's been in the legislature 30-some years. I think we need a newer broom to sweep cleaner right now. But I also think I bring the right kind of experience, not just political and business experience, but life experience to the table here. I think that really matters a lot. I hope it matters a lot.
All right, let's take a commercial break. We'll be back with more with our interview with gubernatorial candidate Adam Edelen after these messages. Stay tuned. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks. Jim Brooks here with Margie Bradford. And we're joined in the studio with a very special studio guest, Adam Edelen. Adam is a candidate for governor in the May primary, Democratic candidate. Adam, I really don't know a lot about your running mate that you've chosen.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, Gil Holland is a Louisville-based community builder and developer. And for folks around here who spend some time in Louisville, they may be familiar with the New Lude neighborhood. And so this is East Market Street. And when I was a boy and my family were hauling hogs and cattle to the stockyards, on one end of East Market you had the stockyards, on the other you had an orphanage, and my dad made the same lame joke every time about where he was going to drop me off at, right? So this was a very economically depressed area, and Gil and his wife Augusta decided that they were going to reinvigorate this community, and now it's the hottest part of Louisville. It is extraordinary with restaurants and offices and bars and cafes and a new hotel. It's become a major destination in downtown Louisville, outside downtown Louisville, and so now he's leading an investment where they're putting in $30 million of investment into the Portland neighborhood of West Louisville, which has a tremendous history. This is where Abraham Lincoln's first paying job was, digging the canal there. It's also where Lincoln saw the slave trade for the first time, and it turned his stomach, and we see the impact of that in our history. So I picked Gil because I believe that we need to bring opportunity to the forgotten places, and it's important, particularly as we're shifting our economic development focus to quality of life, that we have somebody who has a record of bringing neighbors together to create opportunity. He has done this multiple times. The proof is in the pudding. But Gil is also has a tremendous ability to bring folks together, and is lieutenant governor, and I think the lieutenant governor ought to have a job. Which would be a new thing in Frankfort. Gil's job is going to help to help smaller communities reinvigorate their downtowns and their main streets. Because if we can do that, like we have done right here in Bardstown, I remember Dick Heaton calling me when I was chief of staff and saying, Adam, I understand it's the Great Recession, but we've got to have money to bury utilities and extend our sidewalks. And, shortly thereafter, Bardstown was named the most beautiful small town in America.
Right, exactly.
And so that's what we need to replicate in other places. And so we've got to begin to shift some of the grants towards our local towns, and helping developers and local elected officials and business leaders reinvigorate Main Street. Because if you do that, you build a sense of community, and particularly with these millennials, they want to live in a place that has a good, unique quality of life, which is a huge opportunity for us to reinvigorate our local communities. But you got to have stuff like broadband, and you've got to have places for folks to be entertained and to dine and to enjoy community. And again, I say this, and I say this in a lot of places about Bardstown. This is my favorite town in Kentucky. And what you have done here is so special, and there's not a lot that's different geographically about a lot of other places. What makes this community different is the level of engagement of the people who live here and the commitment to their community. And for years, you focused on this sort of civic pride, whether it be the school board or the local chamber of commerce, making this a great place to live. And you've been wildly successful. And we need to make other Bardstowns around Kentucky. Every community is special in its own way, but we've got to figure out how to develop strategic plans and then execute on those plans to really reinvigorate our local towns and communities.
You're right, and I think that we can kind of look back at Bardstown's kind of its expansion and industrial development goes back to the mid-'60s with the election of 65 or 66 when Mayor Gus Wilson and the council.
And they brought gas.
Yeah, and they brought.
That's right.
He ran against his father-in-law
Really?
for mayor because the old guard did not want to bring people in.
Right.
They wanted to keep the quality of the town as it was.
But you have to grow.
And immediately after the election, then
So he
did
beat
get
his
gas.
father-in-law.
Yes.
That made for an interesting Thanksgiving, I'd imagine.
I would, but it was a matter of principle
Right.
because the business People wanted to bring other business,
Right.
wanted to bring
'Cause you gotta grow.
business to town.
And it's been smart growth.
It
has
which
been
is so
very-
key,
yes.
Jim. That's really important because the
Yeah.
choice isn't just between
Right.
growing and preservation. It's smart growth and preserving, which makes this community unique. The same thing that my grandparents brought me to, 35 years ago when I was a kid, and we'd come to Bardstown. The counter at Hearst Drugstore is still there, I'd imagine, right?
Yes,
And
it is.
and I know that the old Talbot Inn, despite it having burnt down, I remember being there as a child. I remember. I
Well,
remember
it just was burnt in. But it
burnt in,
wasn't
not
burnt
down.
out.
That
Not
is
down.
exactly right. But I remember being a little kid putting my
Yeah.
fingers in the bullet holes upstairs that they claim that Jesse James put there. I guess the
It's
only
a good story.
It is a great story, and I loved it. But you've preserved what's unique about this community, and that's what we've got to continue to do. I think the only thing that's different from when I was a boy to now is that the cathedral is air conditioned, and I remember when it wasn't.
I was an altar boy back then.
It's the hottest place in the world, man.
In mid-July and
Oh.
August, it was sweltering, and from my position as altar boy, you would hear people would just pass out.
Yeah, I remember when I was a boy, a very Catholic family, and we'd come up on Friday night and we'd go to the drama, and then on Saturday we would tour, and I'd get a milkshake over at the drugstore, and then we'd have dinner at the old Talbot Inn, and then Sunday morning we'd go to church, and this was always like July. And I remember I loved everything about the trip except how hot it was at the cathedral. So that's how well I know this town.
So you know what I speak.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Adam, would like to talk a little bit about your take on the pension crisis.
Well, it's a mess, and anybody running for office who doesn't tell you that is not being truthful with you, and anybody who's running to be governor who says that this isn't a bipartisan mess isn't telling you the truth. This has been Democrat and Republican governors for a very long time. One of the frustrating things is that the pension systems were dramatically funded as recently as 20 years ago. And we missed about 2/3 to 3/4 of our annual required contributions into the funds, which has created a big problem. So, but that's only, and to my mind, that's only half of it. Now, people have got to understand the teacher pension is different from the state employee and local
Sure.
retirement system. The teacher pension never used placement agents, which are essentially lobbyists who work for the big hedge funds. They never used hedge funds. And that board is much more politically independent from Frankfurt politics. And it was a well-run board. The teachers' retirement system is largely, the mess it's in is largely a function of underfunding. The state retirement system, however, is a different matter. It is plain that the governance there wasn't what we needed it to be. It is plain that it was too politically affected. It's plain that they used these placement agents, which are scandalous. It's plain that they used hedge funds, which made bad investments, and all of this sort of coming together. The fact that we all remember Tim Longmire, and who's now in federal prison. He wanted to be on that board because there were literally billions of dollars in that system, and that just speaks to the fact that we have got to study and find exactly what went wrong, because I'm sure a lot of the board members were properly motivated trying to do their jobs, but it's plain that there were some people who were either bent or asleep at the wheel, because we were abused by Wall Street, and we didn't get the returns we needed, on top of the Great Recession, which
Right.
wiped out trillions of dollars of wealth around
Right.
the world. I understand that. But we've got to fund the system, but we've got to also make sure that the people who are governing these boards and managing the money are only doing so for the benefit of the pensioners and taxpayers, that they are strong enough and independent enough to stand up to Wall Street, and that they're not political pawns for the governor. And I say that as a candidate for governor. We've got to make sure the best and brightest minds in finance are on these boards, running them for the benefit of the people who are relying on the promises that are made. So it's not just about funding, though that's a big part of it. It's about making sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past.
Right. So you have to have a system or a way of vetting these candidates. or
Yes, ma'am.
choosing
And I think there ought to be
candidates
stronger requirements. We need experts. We need people, we need either experts or people who are passionate about good governance and maximizing returns because they've got skin in the game.
And holding them accountable.
And holding them accountable is so important, because I work in business, and I work with entrepreneurs, some startups, but primarily companies that are trying to expand. And there's a lot of nervousness out there about another recession coming in the next 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
And if we don't, and it is the Great Recession that really did tip us over the edge, going
Yeah.
from a badly funded system to one that is historically in bad shape. We need to have the right people in place, and we've got to make smarter decisions. And it means understanding that these systems run solely for the benefit of the pensioners and the taxpayers, and not Wall Street finance managers or not politicians who want to put people who gave them money onto these boards.
What are your thoughts about the last pension solution proposal was to create a different system for new hires in the teacher retirement system? Is there a solution you see for the teacher? And I understand that teachers have a really unique situation because they
don't get Social Security.
They don't get
That's
Social
right.
Security.
Right.
That's right.
Exactly.
Their pension is it.
And Margie, you and I have talked about this for a couple of
Yeah.
years. I support a defined benefit program rather than a defined contribution.
Mm-hmm.
And the legislative pension, for instance, where these guys get full-time pensions for part-term pay, which doesn't make any sense to me. However, that is proof positive that the defined benefit system can work if you fund it. Defined contribution to move to that model would be extraordinarily expensive. The 401k style system is cost prohibitive. We just can't afford to do it. The most effective and cost-effective way to straighten this thing out is to fund the pension. What I'm really worried about in moving away from having a system that is less attractive to new hires is what you and I have discussed, Margie, is
Right.
that it's so important to be able to get the best and brightest in the teaching
Exactly.
profession.
Yes.
And when you don't have, not only when you don't have Social Security, but can't be a Social Security beneficiary in the event that you lose your spouse who paid into that system, is insane. I mean, and it's an outrage. And so, and I'm the last generation of Kentucky kids to be educated under the Thank God for Mississippi model. And we had this revolutionary generation of school teachers who really took us with the Kentucky Education Reform
Right.
Act in 1990. 1990 through the early 2000s, Kentucky had the
Surged ahead.
best rate
Yes.
of we were tied with North Carolina for number one in improvement in educational
Right.
metrics in the whole country. This revolutionary generation of school teachers are now retiring. And we have to be able to replace them with folks who are talented and passionate and can do what for our generation of what the past generation did. And my fear is that if you make teaching an unattractive profession, and it's not just about us not paying at the national average, and it's not just about the pension issue. It's about respecting teachers and not calling them thugs or saying that they're responsible for kids being abused. This is what drives me nuts about the conversation about pensions. Again, it is not the best we can do, it's the least we can do, but even maintaining the pensions that we have doesn't change the fact that every school teacher I know, Margie, spends money out of their pocket
Oh,
buying
they do.
materials for our kids.
I have a son-in-law who's a teacher, and I can testify to that.
And so, everybody does that. And so, when I was a kid, a back to school list was a bunch of folders and a box of pencils.
Right.
Now it's toilet paper and tissue and cleaning supplies, and that's because we've underfunded and undervalued public education. And to have this all going on against the backdrop of a governor who wants to, put in private charter schools to take public money from our public schools and divert them is maddening. Kentucky Kentucky can be whatever it wants to be, provided we invest and have accountability in public education, and we're getting away from that. And that's a big reason why I'm running for governor.
We need to take another commercial break. We'll be back. You're listening to Bradford and Brooks, and we will be back after these messages with our interview with Adam Edelen, Democratic candidate for governor. Stay tuned. All right, you're back with Bradford and Brooks. And Margie, our last commercial talked about anxiety and depression. Those are the things I experience sometimes when I read the news out of Frankfurt. But,
Yeah, with good reason.
Well,
There's
me
definitely
too.
cause
Hope
and
it-
effect.
Let's hope it doesn't lead to a health problem. And
Right.
talking about health, I'd like to ask Adam to talk a little bit about your health plank. I know you started out with the anti-smoking.
Well, this is really important because Kentucky leads the country in a lot of really bad health metrics, and we tried the approach of having a large uninsured population for about 100 years, and it darn near bankrupted us, and it gave us some of the worst health care outcomes in America. So it's very important that we protect the expansion. The fact is, it is cheaper over the long run to have people insured rather than uninsured. But working to make sure that that system is sustainable is really important, because you can't have folks on private insurance who are squeezed out because their premiums continue to go up. And so I've got a skill set to do that. As state auditor, I think you all remember that I did a financial stress test of every rural hospital in Kentucky, and we found that about a third of them were in really bad shape, and about another third were in an unstable position. And preserving the rural healthcare system is really important, because you're not on the grid for economic development if you don't have a hospital or part of that network. No factory is going to locate in a community where somebody who got hurt on the line can't be stitched back up. So this is really important, and it's also important that we start preventative care is really important. You know, keeping people from starting smoking. You know, understanding that you can't seriously treat the opioid addiction crisis if you don't have beds in the local communities for addicts to get treatment. Even in a great community like this, a prosperous community that's educated, you've got a huge opioid problem.
Yes.
And so making sure that we have an adequate number of beds and treatment facilities for addicts to be able to get treated is incredibly important, because we've learned the hard way that one of the fastest ways to go broke is just to lock up addicts. We have to treat this like the public health emergency it is, and it is far easier for people to get treatment if they have insurance. I've done a number of roundtables around Kentucky in addition to the town halls that we've had, focused specifically on the opioid issue. And I've met with law enforcement, and I've met with addicts, and I've met with the people who treat addicts. And it's heartbreaking for folks to know that, you know, they've been on the right way for about a year. They're on the right path. They're working to beat their addiction, but they're scared to death what's going to happen when their insurance runs out. We've got to be smarter about that. And one of the big problems is that behavioral health, which is mental health, addiction, makes up only about 3 or 4% of the overall Medicaid budget, but it's included in the managed care system. And that creates some difficulties because, listen, unlike treating, you know, a respiratory infection or diabetes, treating a mental health issue or an addiction is as much an art as it is a science, and it doesn't always fit the basic, you know, model of managed care and stuff fitting in on an actuarial table. So I think having a governor who understands that we'd probably be better off if you took behavioral health out of managed care and put it back in fee-for-service, I think would be one of the most effective ways to do what we need to do to make our system sustainable, but also effective in making sure that people who are dealing with mental health, and there are a lot of folks, it is a huge issue that we've not wanted to deal with for a long time. You know, it's not well-adjusted kids that are shooting up their classrooms. It's kids who have untreated mental health issues, and we've got to be better about that. It's not just a public health issue and a mental health issue. It's something that's a health care issue. And we've got to be smarter and more strategic, and I'm a governor who I think knows how to do that.
All right. Well, we're down to our last 90 seconds.
All right.
Adam, tell us why we should vote for you in the primary.
Well, I think people should vote for me in the primary because I'm the most future-focused candidate, and I'm the one best skilled to give the working people of Kentucky a fighting chance in what is going to be a dramatically changing economy. And the stakes are high for Kentucky. If we rely on the same old folks saying the same old stuff, we're going to get what we've always got. And that's not adequate to the occasion. We're living through a period of incredible transformation, and it will be both positive and negative. And you better have a governor in place who can diminish the negative and increase the positive. I've got a skill set earned in government and in business to do precisely that. I've got a vision for what a modern Kentucky looks like, and I think I've got the demonstrated skills to make it happen.
All right, very good. Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your travels to stop in with us in the studio.
Well, any chance to get to see y'all and to get to be here in Bardstown is pretty terrific. And I love this community. I know it well. It had a huge impact on the way I grew up, and I want what Bardstown has for the rest of Kentucky.
All right, Adam. Well, thank you again. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's Bradford and Brooks. Margie and I will return next Wednesday. with another program. Till then, listen to the news at the top of the hour, and have a great week, everyone.